Part 1. The Image versus the Accusations. For decades, Sean Diddy Combs stood at the top of the entertainment world, a self-made mogul, the face behind multi-platinum records, fashion empires, and luxury vodka deals. To the public, he was a symbol of success, someone who turned hustle into a billion-dollar brand. But behind the velvet curtains of fame, a much darker story was brewing. Now, in a federal courtroom in Manhattan, that image is shattering. Over the past year, 3 women have come forward accusing Diddy of sexual misconduct, coercion, and trafficking. Each of their stories paints a picture not just of abuse, but of manipulation that stretched over months, even years. The most disturbing of them comes from a woman known only as Jane, who claims that behind the glitz and glamour was a man driven by power and control. A man who, she says, used drugs, fear, and violence to break her down. And if her testimony holds up, it could change everything we thought we knew about one of the most powerful men in music. But who is Jane? And what exactly did she say that has the world watching this trial so closely? What she described on the stand wasn't a one-time encounter, it was a pattern. And the deeper you go into Jane's story, the more disturbing it gets. Part 2. Who is Jane? Her real name is sealed by the court. Legally, she's Jane. But in this trial, she's become the central figure, the woman whose words could pull down the legacy of an entire empire. According to her, she met Diddy in 2021, and what started as a glamorous invitation into his inner circle quickly spiraled into something far more sinister. Jane wasn't some passing acquaintance. For over 3 years, she says she was locked in a cycle of luxury, control, and escalating abuse. The parties were extravagant. The hotels were 5-star. The clothes, the drugs, the lifestyle. It all seemed untouchable from the outside. But according to her, what actually happened behind closed doors was built on fear, silence, and submission. She described the emotional toll in exacting detail, not just what Diddy allegedly did, but how it made her feel. She wasn't vague. She wasn't guessing. She painted a picture so raw that even seasoned court reporters said the room felt frozen at times. Her voice shook, her hands trembled. But the words didn't stop, and as her testimony continued, it became clear. This wasn't about a single horrifying night. It was about years of alleged psychological warfare, and what she called the hotel nights. Because what happened in those hotel rooms? That's what made the courtroom go silent and the headlines explode. Part 3. Inside the hotel nights allegations. According to Jane, Diddy had a name for them. Hotel nights. But what sounded like a harmless phrase was, in her words, the darkest part of their relationship. These nights, she claimed, weren't spontaneous. They were planned, orchestrated. Diddy would allegedly prepare the room, bring in ecstasy or other drugs, and often invite male escorts to join. Jane said it became a routine. Drugs first, then hours, sometimes entire nights, of what she described as non-stop, drugged-out, forced encounters. She recalled being pressured into taking pills even when she didn't want to. It wasn't a request, she said. It was a demand. According to her testimony, Diddy would become aggressive, especially if the night didn't unfold the way he expected. And Jane wasn't the only participant. One escort, named only as Antoine, allegedly appeared in multiple hotel nights over the years. What made these nights so disturbing wasn't just the presence of drugs or sex. It was the sense that Jane had no choice, no voice, just instructions. She said Diddy would watch, sometimes film, sometimes threaten. These weren't intimate encounters, they were performances, and she was trapped in the middle of them. Each night blurred into the next. Her mind, she said, became foggy. Her body went on autopilot, and the longer it continued, the harder it became to recognize who she even was anymore. But then came the night that changed everything, the one she says left her, bruised, terrified, and forced to answer a question she never thought she'd hear. Part 4. The Coercion Accusation. It started with an argument. Jane told the court that Diddy had grown paranoid and controlling in the weeks leading up to that night. He accused her of lying, of betrayal, and then, without warning, he allegedly snapped. Jane described a violent outburst, one that left her with a black eye and 2 swollen welts on her head, the size of golf balls. But what happened next is what stunned the courtroom. According to Jane, Diddy stood over her, opened his hand, and revealed a pill. Ecstasy. "Take this effing pill," he told her. "Take this effing pill. You're not going to ruin my effing night." She tried to resist, said no again and again. And that's when he leaned in, inches from her face, and said, "Then is this coercion?" It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a question. It was a threat wrapped in sarcasm. Jane didn't respond, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't feel safe to. In her words, she was too stunned to even speak. She took the pill. Moments later, she said, she was back in the hotel room, performing oral sex on Antoine while Diddy watched from across the room. "I just felt sick," she told the jury, "like I wasn't even in my own body." The courtroom by now was completely silent. No one moved, no one blinked, because what Jane had just described wasn't a single traumatic event. It was a window into a disturbing pattern of control that prosecutors say could qualify as sex trafficking. And now, with her voice finally heard, prosecutors are building their case, connecting the dots between her trauma and something much bigger. Part 5. What prosecutors are saying. Federal prosecutors aren't mincing words, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey. Yes, the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey. The government's case is laser-focused. This wasn't just about abusive behavior. It was systemic, calculated, repeated. According to Comey, what Jane endured wasn't random, but part of a larger pattern meant to dominate and exploit. Comey has laid out a narrative that spans years, citing hotel nights, text messages, and testimony from other witnesses to show a web of psychological manipulation and coercion. She's argued that Diddy didn't just enable these encounters, he engineered them. Drugs weren't incidental. They were tools. Escorts weren't guests. They were weapons. And Jane wasn't a willing participant. She was a victim of power, isolation, and fear. It's not just about sex or abuse. Prosecutors are framing it as federal sex trafficking, a charge that carries decades in prison if convicted. They're painting a picture of a man who used wealth, fame, and fear to shield himself from consequences. And they're betting that Jane's vivid, emotional testimony will be the thread that unravels his entire defense. But Diddy isn't staying silent. His legal team is already striking back, and they're coming after Jane with everything they've got. Part 6. Diddy's defense strategy begins. As of June 10th, Diddy's defense team has officially begun cross-examining Jane. After 3 days of emotional, gut-wrenching testimony, the tone in the courtroom has shifted. Now it's about scrutiny, pressure, and doubt. His attorneys are expected to attack her credibility, suggest inconsistencies, and question her motives. They've hinted that the relationship was consensual, even mutual, portraying Jane not as a victim, but as a willing participant in an unconventional lifestyle. But the stakes are massive, and every question they ask could either discredit Jane or backfire entirely in front of the jury. So far, Diddy himself has said nothing publicly. No courtroom statements, no press conferences, just silence, and a legal team working around the clock to protect his name, his empire, and his freedom. But there's tension in the air. Because with each question fired at Jane, there's always the risk she reveals something new, something worse, something no one expected. And while the lawyers fight it out in court, the world outside is watching, reacting, speculating, and wondering who might be next.